Hello, my name is Michele, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. Joining me on the podcast today is Amanda Scotto. She is the principal designer and owner of AMA Designs and Interiors in New Jersey. Amanda is a client of mine, and she is going to be sharing a lot of her journey all the way from where she started, some of her early successes, some of the pivots that she's had in her business, and some of the challenges that she's had. She is very transparent in what she shares. And I think there is an opportunity for us to learn something about resilience, about planning, about raising our hand when we need help. And it was just really an awesome conversation. And I invite you to listen in. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hey, Amanda, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Michele. Thanks for having me.
I am excited to talk to you today. We're going to share a little bit of your journey, like what you've learned, how you've pivoted. You have not been in business for an extremely long time, but you've really gone through a lot and had a lot of opportunity, a lot of up, a lot of down, a lot of movement, just trying to figure out, right, who you are in business and how you want to show up in the world. And you're in a really great place and have held on as you've worked through some of the challenges of being a brand new business. And we're going to get into that. But let's start with your background. Like, what did you do? What brought you to opening your own firm?
Sure. So I was always inspired by design and architecture and construction from a very young age. My father and grandfather, they owned a construction business. So I basically grew up on the sites. My mom would drive me to visit, and I would have lunch in the trailer with my dad and grandpa. And it was at that point where my grandpa sat me on his lap and he taught me how to read the blueprints. And then he showed me how these sketches became the framework, and the framework became the building. So from those early beginnings, I was drawing rooms and rearranging my bedroom constantly. And I followed that passion, and here I am today.
What a gift for a young girl, though, right? For it to be like, I can't tell you how many women, especially my age, I'm in my 50s. I can't tell you how many women my age and up that have come on this podcast and said, I didn't even know interior design was an option. Like it wasn't pushed, or in the area of the country, I didn't even know an interior designer. Like it was foreign. It never even came into my way of understanding anything. Yes, architecture, but not design. And so for you as a young girl to even know how all these architecture, the idea of the building, then the layout of the building, and then here is the building, and then now we have to put something in the building, just to have that as a gift and as an opportunity to connect with your dad and your granddad and to be pulled into that world. It's different. It's not what we hear very often. And then, I mean, we could go past that and even look at the gender conversation in that, right? But just you being invited into that as part of a family conversation.
Absolutely. It truly is a gift, because a lot of the designers that I'm friends with, they've entered into the field through career changes. And I always had that knowingness that this is what I want to do. I never had another career in my mind. I'm just going to be a designer. That's it. My parents wanted me to be a doctor. It's like, don't do that. It's too competitive. It's too this. You're not going to make money. It's too artistic. And Yeah. You tell me no, you tell me not to do something, I'm going to do it.
Well, okay. As a parent, I think we've all learned that. Keep that in mind. You have a very young one right now,
Yes.
but the day is coming, right? So if we want them to do something, I can remember even telling my kid, don't eat that. Don't eat that. That you don't want to eat that. And they would turn around and eat it. So sometimes we have to use the psychology against them. Now that I think about it, you made me just kind of like think about my own childhood. And what was interesting was my dad loved math. My dad was in computers. My dad, did a lot of those things. And a lot of my core memories were about balancing checkbooks, learning math, doing base 8 and base 16 and things like that none of my peer group was doing. But my dad loved it. I loved math, showed an affinity for it. And it was the thing that kind of drew us together, that very logical math thinking.
Yes.
And then my mother she's creative and she sewed and she did, clothing and things like that. And so just kind of being pulled into both sides and now looking at some of the things that I love and I enjoy is kind of the merging of the two.
Yes, absolutely.
And as kids, we don't even know what we're picking up. So, I guess maybe a Barbie playhouse is along the lines of what your daughter could have, right? Or all the different little doll houses. And now they've got them where you can wallpaper them and fix them. So you can pass along your love of interiors and of design and all things texture and textile to her.
Well, it's already being passed down to her because I have already noticed her. She's going to be 2 and she's been moving furniture throughout the house since she could walk at 1. And I remember asking other people, I'm like, is this normal? Like, is your child moving furniture or is it just mine?
It was just yours. So, so one more quick thing that I think is really interesting. It's like I'd not really thought about it this way before, Amanda, until you shared that. But both of my sons, my husband loves building things. He loves construction. So he works in computer software as well. He works for a tech company, but he did drafting in school. Like he really enjoys that. So we've always had a part of that going on at our home. And both of my boys understand texture. They understand every single part of a window treatment. They started building with Legos and blocks and connects and then, Lincoln logs. And over time, they were drawing out like plans for a bookcase. They might draw out plans for their own desk. They were drawing those kinds of things. Now, fast forward, both of them are in construction. They build some of their own furniture. They are cutting out walls in their house and putting in closets and using extra space. So it's so interesting to see them now in a commercial building environment or in their own home environment, taking those same skills. So I guess what that really goes to show in some ways is, yes, there's maybe an affinity because we see it, but it's the nurturing, right? Mm-hmm. That this talent was nurtured by your dad and your granddad, then it was nurtured by your teachers at school. You're nurturing it with Antonia, and then you're actually having to constantly nurture it in your own business.
Yes, I'm a forever student. I have signed up for so many courses and coaches and really continuing my education, whether that be in marketing, business, a new software. I'm constantly learning to improve my craft and also just streamline my business and make it more profitable.
So when did you officially start your business, Amanda?
In 2014.
Okay. And tell me what it looked like at that point in time. What were you doing? Yeah. Ooh. All right. Let me set the stage. I'm going to set the stage.
It was
everybody starts somewhere. It's totally okay. And that's the stage I'm setting. Everybody has to start somewhere. And I want to invite you as we take a moment to look back at where you started. Let's look back with grace. Let's look back with appreciation. Let's look back without embarrassment. I mean, we all start somewhere. If anybody listening to this podcast hears anything, I want them to not be afraid of their own origin story or embarrassed of their own, even when it takes twists and turns, knocks you down and skins your knees. It's your story. And it is part of what has you in the wonderful position that you are today. Okay.
Absolutely.
So here's your permission to share your origin from 2014.
Sure. So in 2014, it was a small business. I was solo, I was freelancing. I was also working full time at another company. And before 2014, I also had clients and I was freelancing, and then I picked up speed and I said, okay, I need to make this a real established business. So there came a point in 2019 where I reached that fork in the road where I was attracting very large jobs. And I either had to turn them away and recommend them to another local designer, or that was my opportunity to go full time with my business and hope for the best. So in 2019, that's when I left my security blanket of my full-time job. And that's when I went full-time headfirst into entrepreneurship. And 2019 is not that far away. I mean,
no. When you did, let me ask you this, Amanda. When you made that switch and you were like, all right, yes, I've started a business. Maybe it started a little bit as a side hustle, freelancing at the beginning. That's a very common refrain that we hear from people that are working in some type of a corporate environment or somebody else. They have 1 or 2 clients on the side as they're starting to get started. I would say 9.9 times out of 10, it would not have been a client for the company that they were working for. So it's a different ideal client, if you like. They're not stealing from the company. It's a different type of client, different type of work. And then it starts to pick up speed. And then they think, oh, this could be a business on its own. Do I want to be a business owner or do I want to be a designer? 2 different things. So you started making the decision, I'm going to own my own business and do some of these things. And in 2019, if I am hearing you correctly, that's when things really came together and you realized this is more than a side hustle. This is more than freelance. This is more than I'm serving the client. These are becoming large projects, larger budgets, larger demands, higher expectations, and I've got to be even more serious about how I'm showing up, my brand, what I'm doing, how I'm engaging with the client. So in 2019, can you think about or pinpoint any changes that you made that you put into play or into practice to move you forward that were different than the way that perhaps you had run the business from 2014 up until that point?
Sure. I mean, in 2019, there was a lot of personal factors that drove my motivation to make my business successful. So I did have an exit plan from my current job, and my goal was to sign 5 clients. So I had a newsletter, which I was actively nurturing monthly. And I would put out a promotion that like, if you sign now, like my rate is going to go up for the following year. And so like lock in now. And it worked. So having those 5 clients just gave me the security and the peace of mind that, okay, this is good for the next few months. And also personally, during this year, I moved into my first home with my husband. Well, he was my fiance at the time, which we were renovating that place. I was also getting married that year. So those 2 factors, I'm like, I don't have time for a full-time job if I'm moving and renovating a new place and planning a wedding and getting married.
Right. So you really wanted some more control over the work that you were doing, the time that you were investing, and they became your security blanket. And usually it's thinking, like for me, one of the things I always think of is if I sell something, the first one could be a fluke, but if I can sell 2 or 3, I've got something. Now I can run with it. I just need that first one gets me a little bit of confidence, but 2 or 3 makes it feel solid, right?
Yeah.
So your number for you at that time was 5 projects. And I'm assuming that at the time, it wasn't just 5 projects, but it was 5 projects with some, let's say, financial
Yes,
bucket
it was
that they were
definitely
filling,
linked
right?
to, I wanted to supplement what I was making at my job. So I wanted to make sure I was covering that for at least a 6-month period. And prior to that, I was aggressively saving and aggressively building up my accounts to cover my expenses.
That's right. So you went into this with a plan to save up so that I'm not just starting. So you're not just draining money, you had been building. Okay.
It was actively a year exit plan and strategy before I jumped.
Yeah. And I love that, because sometimes people think just jump, and it's not always that easy. I know even when I was doing, Drapery Workroom and working at the Custom Home Furnishings Academy and doing all those things, exiting one thing and entering another, it really is a transition. And there were times that I was running businesses parallel so that I could dwindle one down and raise the other one up, right? Whether it was corporate or not, that's kind of the way that works. But it does give you the ability to flex until you get to that tension point that says, I cannot do both. Like you knew, I can't work full time and renovate a home and try to plan a wedding at the same time. What I can do, though, is become master of my own schedule by having my own business and launching that. I can build the security in because I've been saving in advance. I have 5 clients. Now, if I can give them X amount of time, and then I have time to get married and all the things, I can make this a go. So one thing, though, that's a lot of changes in 1 year. They say some of the most stressful things are like buying a house, getting married, having a child, experiencing a death. You did a large portion of those all at once.
Yes. And 2019 was actually the best year. Like, I feel like I beat the statistic. Like, they always say there's always problems in your marriage the first year. Like our marriage the first year was amazing. Business was amazing during that year. I tripled what I was making at the firm my first year. So I'm very proud of that. But as you know, 2020 was the following year. So
yeah. So I want to ask you this, though, before we move into the 2020. If you could look back now, that's been, gosh, almost 4 years. That's a little crazy to think, isn't it? If you could look back those 4 years, what were the lessons or what were the things that you feel like perhaps you learned in 2019 that had you poised to go into 2020?
I think my main lesson was the financial piece.
Okay.
And this piece has evolved, as you know, because we've been working with you, but I knew that if I wanted to be successful, I had to manage my cash flow correctly. And I would always have anxiety when it came to sales tax, and I had to file that. So immediately I worked with a bookkeeper. I knew that was my first hire. That was my, I didn't want to do anything wrong. I was so terrified. So that was my first piece. And immediately I had separate buckets or separate accounts for my cost of goods, for profit. And by building all of these accounts, that really set me up for success and also did help me in 2020.
Okay. Now, if we look back at 2019, so that's what you had foresight to do. You had to have already, I mean, let's be honest. The fact that you knew going into even starting your own thing, save up in advance, get things ready, you already were somewhat financially aware. You just kind of honed that skill even more in 2019 to get you ready without knowing what was coming, right? Nobody knew that this was coming. I can remember, it was January market of 2020, and it was in Las Vegas. And I cannot even tell you how many people online kept saying how sick they got. We had not even hardly heard of COVID at that point.
Yeah,
they were all saying,
Cavis.
yep, everybody was, that's right. They were there for both. And everybody kept talking about how sick they were. I had friends who went to Disney in January that year and ended up having to leave. They were all so sick. And it was all most likely COVID, but we didn't know it yet. So in other words, we didn't know this was getting ready to come. We didn't know that it hit us. We didn't even know it hit us till after it hit us, right? So you know what you did financially to get you ready just for the next, just like in general, to get you ready for the next place your business was going to go. Looking back now, though, at what happened in 2020 forward and where you were in 19, where do you think if you could go back, you would tell yourself, sweet girl, get this ready or tighten up this process or know this because you're getting ready, potentially to be smacked, right?
Yeah.
Where was the gap that if you could go back to yourself and say, close this gap, and it might not stop everything, but it'll at least prepare you. So you were prepared with the financial buckets. Where do you think you were ill prepared?
I wish I had more of a cushion because in 2020 I had several projects and then those ended and then radio silence for, I don't know, 4 to 6 months. And I was terrified. Because at that point I had different responsibilities. I've already been living in my home and I just didn't see how I could make ends meet. I think the aside from building a cushion, the second piece would be that marketing puzzle piece and get that in order. I feel like sometime I was probably, I don't want to say desperately messaging people, but like there was a little bit of an urgency because I had to pay my bills.
Right.
I did lock in a lot of online design projects and I was doing that the entire year. So I managed to stay afloat. I'm also very thankful that at that time, I actually didn't hire my intern. So in 2019, I did have an intern helping me. And I was thinking of hiring her. And I said, you know what? Let's see how the year goes. And I'm just glad I took that pause because I usually put the carriage before the horse. And I'm just glad that happened because if I had more of an overhead, like I was working from home. I didn't have an office space. I didn't have employees. So thankfully I was okay.
Right. It's funny. I'm actually in my own body and head, like re-feeling the feelings of 2020. And I know how it felt on my side for my clients and kind of some of the desperation of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen now? Especially my clients that were newer in business and didn't have the deep bench that, we've got projects already out there. We can keep them moving. We just won't all be on site at the same time. Like there was some of that, but there was a lot of anxiety around carrying an employee load, carrying an office load, just the overhead in general that they had, and how to keep all the money flowing. And the biggest challenge that a lot of people had was not having a big enough cushion. I think we are seeing that even right now, moving into some of our economic changes that are happening. And I usually tell people a minimum of 3 months, if not 6.
Yeah.
And even at that time, I was saying some of these things and people were like, oh, you're overestimating. And I'm like, no, I am not. I'm telling you. And what's interesting, Amanda, is especially the designers that I work with that are multi-million dollars, and let's say that their monthly numbers are, I don't know, let's say $40,000. That's $120,000 at a minimum for 3 months that we need to have that we can get to quickly, that is outside of the day-to-day. So imagine what it takes to save $120,000. That is not money that is taken out and paid to the owner, not money that is taken out and paid to other people, not paid to cover bills, not paid to cover product. And so that means the company has to have been successful financially for a while with a plan to save that money to weather the storm for what is coming. It also means that a company has to be able to watch what is happening in real time, not in 2020 vision.
Right.
And a lot of companies got caught and continue to get caught because they're managing their financials in a 2020, like hindsight, not I am managing with detailed empirical data today, right? And or I'm managing with today's data, but I don't have enough of a cushion, like you said. So that makes every decision of higher importance in some ways than if you have cushion. I mean, think about that. I have $20 in my pocket. I go out, I buy a piece of gum, it doesn't really matter. I've got 10 cents in my pocket and I got to make a purchase. I'm going to think very carefully about that purchase. It's just what we do. Okay, so we move into 2020. I want to applaud you for going online, for being scrappy. Like, here's the deal. We own our own companies. This stuff is not easy. Anybody who tells you owning your own business is easy, or if anybody listening thinks I work for a design firm and it's just so easy, I'll go do it myself and make all this money. That is not the way, that is not the lesson here.
That is so far from the truth. And 2020, I worked non-stop. Now, I may have not had a client within the first few months, but I was innovating. I was doing SEO. I was redoing my website. I was learning. I stayed up past midnight. I'm working. I'm coming up with my next idea, my next service, my next package. I even had a trial like membership at one point. I was like, I need like reoccurring income. I need something.
I love it.
So I threw spaghetti at the walls until something stuck. I did make my commitments, my financial commitments, but man, it was very hard. It was very hard. But I think everything that I actually put in place, like redoing my website, learning SEO, like learning all these different platforms, actually made my 2021 extremely successful. So while that was probably the worst year financially, 2020, and also mentally, like that was hard. So putting all those little things in place and planting the seeds, I got to see the fruits of the labor the following year.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You know what's so interesting is I've shared this before, that when people ask me back in the day, or I would ask, how much money can you make in this? How much money can you make in window treatments? How much money can you make in design? How much money? And people weren't answering me. And I always thought they weren't answering me because they were being rude. Like, you're so rude. But it wasn't. It was that they did not know. They didn't know their numbers. They really just, they took what came, they made what they made, but they didn't know potential, right? And when we are looking at things like that, we don't know our potential. When I figured out what the potential was and people would ask me, hey, Michele, can you make money at this? You know what I would always say back to them? Are you hungry? Not yes, not no, but are you hungry? Because if you're hungry, then you're going to hunger for education. You're going to hunger for a better process. You're going to hunger for your ideal clients. You're going to hunger to have a great atmosphere in your business. You're going to hunger for good employees who can bring the vision to life. In other words, you're not going to be complacent. You're not going to sit and wait on it to come to you. You're going to actively invest in yourself, in your team, in your craft, in your industry to get it done. That's what I feel from your experience in 2020. Certainly, maybe the money didn't come in as quickly and it went out faster than you would have loved, but you were making investments. You weren't drinking wine and eating bonbons. It may have been a little bit of that, but you were not drinking your wine and eating bonbons during the day and not working. You weren't sitting counting all the people that weren't coming to the door and trying to have a design plan done. You were saying, I can't do anything about this, but I can do something about this. And
Yes.
that means let me go dig into SEO. Let me be willing to try some different things instead of pigeonholing myself. Let me see how I can be uncomfortable. Let me see what might work. Some things did, some things didn't.
Right.
But the Amanda, this is the point I want to make. The Amanda that walked into 2021 was not the Amanda that walked into 2020, which was not the Amanda that walked into 2019.
Right.
So tell me about your 2021, where you started to see the fruit of that labor, where all of those investments in you and your business and your craft, in your tech deck, right? In the stack of technology that you were using to support your company. You really went deep in a lot of areas. You're a super smart woman. Tell me how that played out for you in 21.
Wow. Well, 2020, I feel like I had a wish list of like projects and things I wanted to do when I had time, So finally, like I got my website in order, and I was just every day or every week, I was just checking through all those passion projects that I wanted to do. And when I went into 2021, I had the systems in place. I had my marketing dialed in. I knew who I was talking to. I was reaching out to them monthly. So I had the consistency. I also had automated a lot because I was working from home by myself at that time. So I have a scheduling system that sends out automatic reminders. Even in Gmail, I would draft out emails and schedule that. So I wasn't sending emails at 3 a.m. to people.
Right.
And trying to think what else I had automated. Mostly it was scheduling and like reminders, and also using Asana for all of the to-dos and tasks for every single client and project, and setting reminders to follow up with that person, and really managing myself, because I am a post-it note girl and I will tile my whole desk with post-its. So I had to get myself organized because the post-it is not going to remind me to do the thing. So Asana has changed my life.
Yep, technology. I am a huge fan of my Google Calendar, and I have like 4 or 5 calendars all synced together, and they all show things in different colors. And it's interesting because when I look at the color, like for me, if I'm going to do a podcast, the color is like a navy. If I am going to do a coaching call, it's green. And so I can look at the color and go ahead and know what is going to be expected of me in terms of how I think and do in that next hour. So just color coding it was huge.
Absolutely.
And then I as well use Asana to keep up with all of that. And the combo of the two is what allows me to work through my day with ease and to know when things are scheduled and walk away. So I love that. Tell me this. In 2021, you were dialed in, the clients started coming, the business started growing. What was your next big, okay, here we grow again?
Well, in 2021, I was continuing the fruits of my labor, and I was growing a little melon of my own. I was pregnant. So this was a huge pivot for me, because I actually had a very sick pregnancy. I had hyperemesis, which is only happens in like 1% of women. So I was extremely ill for the entire 9 months of my pregnancy, which I had to figure out how I was doing business, because I signed all these lovely clients and I couldn't physically see them. I was too sick to go to their house. I was going to the hospital 3 times a week for infusion treatments that were 3 hours each. So I was doing a lot of FaceTime. At this point, I said, okay, if I can't physically be there, yes, I can be there by Zoom, but I do need a representative of my company to be on site. So I hired a designer, and I also had an intern at that time. So this was a big leap for me to hire two people from going from just myself.
And being ill at the same time. My sister-in-law had that. She had it with more than one of her not all of her pregnancies, but more than one. It was rough.
Yeah. And the medication that they gave me would basically put me in a coma. So I was like, you don't understand. I have to run a company. I was like, I can't sleep all day. I got people, I got jobs and projects to run.
I got things to do.
Like, I can't be sleeping. So it was a huge challenge. And the jobs that I happened to sign were two from the ground up new builds, which thankfully they are year-long to 2-year-long projects, but it was a massive undertaking. And to have, two new people under my belt who I'm technically training, I just threw them in. They said, hey, we're doing this. Like,
yeah. Well, and you probably had to really hire at that time the right people that could come in under that, right? And know. Yes. And so that pulled you through. You have a beautiful little girl now, and that brought you into what, 2022 and 23. So tell me about what you've shifted and pivoted and where you are now.
Yes. So after I had her, there was an adjustment period to the type of jobs I was taking, when I was working, and really what I stood for as a business owner, as a mom. Like, being pregnant and also becoming a mother, it has put so much into perspective. Like, what I'm going to tolerate. Like, I no longer tolerate that. I no longer stand for that. And I put a lot of strong boundaries in place where when I was working alone, yeah, I would answer a client at 9 p.m. I would go to their house on a Saturday or Sunday, and I had no life. And now that I have a little one, I can't just show up to somebody's house willy-nilly on a Saturday or Sunday. Like, I have a life on the side that I need to take care of. And the boundaries are so firm and in place in my business, and it's helped me like bring back more joy back to my own life.
Right. So a couple of things, and we've mentioned that we're working together and have been, but one of the things that I always ask, and you go through too, is I say, tell me what the life is that you want. Let's not, and this may be counterintuitive for some. Let's start your strategic plan. Let's start your visioning. Let's start your ideas about your future with what is the life that you want? How much time do you want to be with the people that you love? What do you need out of that life? Now, what's left? How do we take that and use that for the business? Like, what is the boundary around that time? Because it doesn't matter whether it's your family or whether it's the business or whether it's a client. Anything can suck up our time and attention if we let it. Anything. Yes. I am having this big need. We're in the middle of a kitchen renovation. We were supposed to start it in 2020, and we kept putting it off. And finally this year I was like, I am done. I cannot put this off anymore. Rip this thing out. It's 26 years old. Please, can I have a new kitchen? And it wasn't that my husband was saying no. It was the market and all the things. And I was like, I'm willing. So we started it all the way in March for it to be finished in November, just with the planning and the organization and us having to take a pause for family time. But I say that because I knew what I needed in my home and in my life. And then we built it back into the company, right? And if you think about it, that's what you've done too. Remember when I said the Amanda of 2019 wasn't the Amanda of 2020? Well, she's not the Amanda of 23, and she's not the Amanda of 24. And so one of the things I've encouraged you to do and my clients to do and encourage the listeners to do is every year think about, as the owner, what is your job description for the next year? Because it shifts.
Yes.
These things are moving. Strategic plan. I had somebody tell me today, "Oh, Michele, that makes me feel overwhelmed." I'm like, then just write down, what you want next year to look like in your business. That's what I'm trying to get you to do.
Yeah.
Nothing super structured that feels like it's tying you or weighting you down. I just want you to say, here's what I want it to look like next year. And here's how I want to show up for my family and friends. And here's how I want to show up in my business. Like, what is that? And so if you, and I don't know that you've done this yet, but I know we're going to be working on it. Write the job description for the Amanda of 2024. Because what we might see is, if you have your description from this year and you have it from next year, if there are things that you no longer want to do, want to tolerate, want to be active in, and it comes off your list, somebody might need to pick that up. And that gives us an understanding of who to hire, who to educate, who to offload that to.
And I love how you worded that, because I was one of those people when you gave me the assignment of creating a strategic plan. I'm like, I have never done this. I was like, I don't even know what it entails. I have the goals and I write them down, and I might loosely like write the steps to get there or what I'm going to do, but I never had an actual document with all of those pieces. It was more of a loose vision board with some pretty pictures and some daily tasks to get there. I got there, but it wasn't as organized and professional as the strategic plan that we've come up with. But I do agree. Starting with the vision and starting with the life you want to live first gave me the why to, it gave me the why. It made me realize, okay, this is what I'm working for. This is what I want. So how do I get there?
That's right. That's right. Sometimes I've gone through business myself where I just took what came. Like, I guess that's what I'll do, versus going after what I wanted. I've even spoken to people that are in corporate who say, I don't love my job. And I'm like, great, what do you want to do? I don't know. I'm just waiting to see if something comes up. And I'm like, why would you not figure out what you love to do and go look for it? Do you really think like your ideal job is going to come to your house and ring the doorbell and say, here I am? It doesn't work. It doesn't normally work that way. And I think that many of us creatives, we can pivot, we can shift, we can change, we can do. But in the changing and the shifting and doing, we have brand clarity, right? We talk about, you hear that on every podcast all over the place, mine included. What is your brand? What is your brand? What is your brand? And brands are great, but how does that translate into who you are, who your employees are? How does that translate into what are the financials that are needed to run this company that you need? One of the things I ask you is, what does the company need to show up and do for Amanda? Not just what is Amanda going to put into the company, but what do we need it to do for Amanda? I know even in Matrique, when we were doing modeling, right? That's the beauty of Matrique, is what do we need the company to do and provide for Amanda and for her home? Let's put that in. Now, what does it need to provide for the company? Now, what does it need to provide for the client? And then we're able to see a financial model that supports the vision, that supports what you want to do, your new perspective as a mom and as a wife.
Yes. And I think that the big pivot for me was I was taking any job that came my way because I was trying to make up from the previous year. So I was saying yes to everything. And then in 2021, I found that me and my new team were running around with like our heads cut off. We're doing everything. We were very, very busy. And then after I had her, I said, this is not sustainable. There is no way I can run around and drive like I was here, there, and everywhere across New Jersey with a newborn. And there was just no way I could sustain that pace. So I realized that, okay, I need to look at my services, my offerings, and see what is successful, what is bringing in the most money, what is what are the jobs that I like doing? And how can I get more of that? And my goal really was to attract larger jobs and take less of them. And I think that's
right.
useful, to be honest.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So what is your goal? Here's the thing I'll say, not only have you been hungry, you've been scrappy.
Yes.
And you've been willing to take input. I've got to tell you from the very beginning, one of the things that I was really impressed with by you was when we started working together, you're like, I'm an open book. And I admit, here are some areas where I could have done some things differently. Here's some areas where maybe I did it all right. And it was outside of my control, or, maybe a hybrid. Here's some things I did really, really well and didn't even know I did them well, or didn't have a process to replicate that. But you were very open in saying, like you said earlier, I want to learn and I want to engage. And so that combination of I'm hungry, I'm scrappy, I'm open to learning, I'm open to new ways or better ways, and digging into that. I think that, honestly, Amanda, is what is going to continue to sustain you. And I do believe that is what is going to continue to make you profitable and more profitable. We've talked about it multiple times. How many times have I said to you, you are poised, like you are doing the things. And even in our time together, you've seen blips and dips like everybody has, but you have seen kind of like how it can come together when the attention is put, like, don't ever stop marketing. We've learned the lesson. Always keep your finances in order. We've learned the lesson. The things we hear, you experienced through the bumps up and down, like businesses do.
Yes.
But you learned the lesson. That is I think the big point is taking in and learning the lesson and then applying it forward, not just having it happen and not do anything about it.
Yes. And I will say, prior to working with you, I knew that my financials weren't quite up to par, or not where I felt super confident running a business. Like, I always wanted an office space. I had all these other goals, but I never had the confidence in my numbers to make those decisions. So
you had good numbers. That's the thing. You had good numbers, but it was the understanding of how do I now use those numbers to grow for the next thing, like an office space or another hire or whatever, right?
Yes. I was always operating from a place of scarcity because I had all this money and I didn't know what was mine, what was the client's for cost of goods. And I was just squirreling away money. So I wasn't actively making like smart decisions. I got very lucky. I felt like in the financial aspect, yes, I had my buckets, but it wasn't until after you and I started working together where I realized a really big issue financially. And that made me nosedive in 2022. So I will get vulnerable here. I was at the point where I thought I had to file bankruptcy. I went from like 2022, barely any clients, 2021, like killing it in business, scaling up, hiring multiple people. I had these massive jobs. I did so well financially. And then 2022 just hit a nosedive. And what I realized was it was the poor financial planning. Yes, I implemented profit first method, but what happened was it was the things were taking so long to ship. So while I thought I had the money in my account, I was willy-nilly spending. And then I see like 6 to 7 months later, everything hitting my statement. I'm like, what is this? What is this? What is this? It's like, why is the credit card bill so high? Then I realized all these things have shifted, and then my card got charged. And then I was like, oh no, the money is not there because I mistakenly overspent because I hired all these people. So that is when I started working with you. and we've corrected the problem. I made it through, and I'm doing so much better than before. And now I have the confidence in my numbers. I am a totally different person than I was like a year ago. And I'm pulling reports, I'm analyzing my numbers, I'm sitting down with my accountant. We're having these educated conversations. I'm making decisions based on numbers, margins, percentages, like all of these things that I did not have the confidence or the knowingness. And I can actually confidently say that I'm getting my new office space soon.
Awesome. Awesome. It's one of those things again, and I love the vulnerability. Thank you for sharing that. But we all, I mean, I've shared it. We all go through seasons and times where we can get things right for so long that we assume that we know what's happening, but we don't.
Mhm.
And it was just this perfect match of when are things coming in and they hit at the wrong time. And there you were. But the other thing that we learned through this even together was sometimes understanding what the number is, but understanding what the number needs to do for you. I think
Yes.
that's what a lot of people miss, the net profit. They look at net profit and think that's profit, I can take it home. Or look in the bank account and think it's there, I've paid everything, I can take it home, instead of saying, but what does that bucket of money need to do in the future? And have I set it up to do that? And that's a big question to ask you. What is the job responsibility of your net profit? Tell me what the job responsibilities are for that number. And then we can look at it. And so just digging into some of that, because it can be different for everybody, and looking at what your company needed it to do, and then setting up processes to protect it. And once you know what we need it to do, and we set up boundaries around it to protect it, you had created such beautiful boundaries and all these other places, but that was like one of the last areas that maybe didn't have as clear a boundary around it as we needed to. And so I know it's been a challenge for you, and I know it because it brings up a lot of emotion. And we've had a lot of hard looks into numbers and looks into things. But again, you've been scrappy, you've been open, you are in a healthy financial place, you're getting an office space, you have your team, you did everything that I asked you to do and more. And you should feel so great. Because now you have tools in a toolbox. The next pivot's coming. It's coming for all of us. We all are going to have that opportunity to take what we have learned and to apply it in a new way. That's what all of education is. What have you learned? How do you apply it forward? And I just want to encourage you that you have a really healthy toolbox to apply forward. So
I feel so much more confident, and I'm so grateful for you, for your help, because without your teachings, I wouldn't have noticed that problem until I was probably too far along. Like I was able to catch it and slow down the train, but there's been many times where I've cried to you and you've picked me up, and I needed that. But we made it through.
We made it through. The willingness to reach out for help. Let's don't miss that point. Because that can be a hard place and a vulnerable place. But you did two things. You recognized it, but you also invested in a solution. I mean, you were having a trouble and I'm not free. So you were willing to invest in a solution to the problem to get you out of it, and then to get you way past, because the lessons will carry you forever.
Yes. Definitely.
Right. You were willing to raise your hand in class. Excuse me, I have a problem over here. But you know what? Not everybody that calls me has that exact same problem or that exact same challenge. But what I do want you to know, and you do know this, we're all just people just trying to make it through. So if you've got a problem, ask somebody. If your problem is in marketing, get a marketing coach. If your problem is in sales, get a sales coach. If your problem is in process, get a process coach, right? If your problem is in financials and CFO type work and not understanding your numbers, get Matrique Solutions and call me. Like
Yes.
there are answers out there for everybody, and it's just not being afraid to raise your hand and ask the question.
Yes, definitely.
So Amanda, tell people where they can find you. Where are you hanging out online?
I mostly hang out on Instagram, so you can find me there at AMA Designs Interiors. You could also find me on Facebook. I'm there, and Threads, and what's the other one?
Your website. Tell us your website. That's all right.
Website is byamadesigns.com.
Perfect. And we'll put all that in the show notes so everybody can follow you. And thank you so much for sharing your journey. It's really, it was kind of, well, it wasn't kind of, it was very fun to look back and, you know, here you've now documented your origin story. Think about that. That's pretty cool.
Yes, that is cool.
That is cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for joining us. I appreciate just your honesty in sharing the great things and also the areas that you had opportunity to learn and to grow and to do things differently. You know, if you're listening to this and you're like, you see yourself or your business in some way in the conversation that we had or some aspect of your business, and you're thinking, you know, it's time, I want to throw up my hand and say, I need help too. I would love to be on your call list. So you can reach out to me at scarletthreadconsulting.com, go to the Work With Me page and fill out a form and let's talk. Let's just see. Here's the deal. If I can't help you, I probably know somebody who can, and I will point you in that direction. But we don't have to do business or life alone. We weren't meant to. And so don't feel like you've got to sit there and not look back over your past history and growth with anything other than with love and with kindness and with grace and with an opportunity to learn to move forward. So be intentional about asking for help, because profit doesn't happen by accident. Profit is a Choice is proud to be part of the designnetwork.org, where you can discover more design media reaching creative listeners. Thanks for listening, and stay creative and business minded.